2008. Marvel releases the first movie of what they will call their newly series of superhero movies. It all started with Iron Man, a banger-ass movie, then came along with it other superhero movies, like The Incredible Hulk or Captain America, until one movie crossovered them all. 2012, The Avengers dropped, directed by Josh Whedon. LOL. And from then on started a new age of movies, the age of Marvel movies. Marvel would separate the eras of their movie in what they call phases. Phase 1 started in 2008 and ended in 2012, and it ended with the Avengers. It was about how the group of superheroes called the Avengers was created. It included Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, Thor, the world was hungry for more Marvel movies at the time, and they were served with Phase 2 arriving. Phase 2 started in 2013 and ended in 2015. It included 6 new movies, which weren't all that good to be honest, but they were still making a lot of success at the time. So, what do you think Marvel did when they saw the big load of money coming in their bank accounts? Well, they made Phase 3, started in 2016 and it ended in 2019 with 11 movies, which is a lot if we compare it to Phase 1 and 2. And not gonna lie, when it came out, I enjoyed these movies and I still like some of them today. The last movie of these connected movie franchise saga would technically be Spider-Man Far From Home, but let's say that theoretically it is Avengers Endgame. Spoiler alert, this movie ended with the death of Iron Man, the one and only.
The only.
It was a really nice conclusion to the Infinity Saga. Not perfect, but it was still quite good. I was living in peace with it. I was a fanboy of Marvel at the time. I knew pretty much all about it, but do you know what big companies like to do with their successful franchises? Milk it too much. Marvel, being a branch of Disney, would be one of the biggest victims of this milking way to do money. Well, who's surprised anymore when it's Disney, LMAO? Wanna know something funnier? In 2019, Disney created their own streaming platform called Disney Plus, as you probably already know. They were trying to compete with Netflix at the time, but when it came out, there wasn't enough movies and series to compete with Netflix because Netflix had a good catalog at the time. So with that information in mind, could you tell me what do you think Disney did? They used their biggest franchise to make the most money possible out of it. Well, this situation rushed quite a bit the processing of creation of these series and of these movies. So Disney's biggest franchises all became quantity over quality, and I believe Marvel is the biggest victim of that situation. And so with that came along Phase 4, which will be the first phase of their new Marvel saga called the Multiverse saga. And that brings us to today. Well, technically, Phase 4 is kind of finished, so we're over that atrocity, but that's what I'm going to talk about today. I am going to give you my ranking of all the Phase 4 projects, and I'm going to try to be fast. Then I'm going to tell you why I think this phase sucks, compared to the other one at least. And finally, I'm going to explain why I'm not really a Marvel fanboy anymore as much as I was, and why I'm scared for the future of Marvel. Wandavision was the first series of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I insist on the Marvel Cinematic Universe because there was other shows before WandaVision related to Marvel, but this one is the first one canonically included in the MCU, I believe. So, the series is about how Wanda created this fake little life with Vision, where she has children and lives a fast-going life. To start off, I actually enjoyed this one. It has 9 episodes of around 40 minutes long each, but take out the 7 minutes of end credit scenes and it gives you 10 minutes. Each episode has a different ambience style, which correspond to decades, I believe, from the 50s to today. This series hides a mystery about how Wanda created this place where she lives her fake life, and that is pretty much why I love the series so much. Let me explain. I was really into that mystery and I loved the different style of each episode. Wanda's character development was well made in my opinion, so I had purpose watching this show. The biggest problem I have with it, apart from the 7 minutes of end credits, is the ending of the show. We get that revelation about our neighbor being another sorcerer this whole time, and we get this kind of boring last battle between her and Wanda. This show ends up with Wanda leaving the fake village she created, and she goes in the forest to study the Dark Old, a dark magic book. This conclusion wasn't really that good for me. Actually, I found it kind of boring because it left us with more questions than we had when we started to watch the show. So for me, apart from the bad ending, I loved the show. So I'd put it in an A tier and I'd give it an 8 out of 10. This is the second show of the MCU, and oh boy did I force myself to watch it. I forced myself to try to find good things about it during my watch time, but I was just lying to myself. It was kind of trash actually. I'm really sad to say it because I love these two characters. Their moment really didn't interest me that much. The villains were pretty mid, and the new Captain America was a trash character. The story is just the follow-up of this scene in Endgame, where Sam gets Captain America's shield. Well, it didn't last long in his hands, I guess. The only part I kinda liked about the story was the part with Isaiah Bradley and how the super soldiers were treated. That was quite interesting, but it didn't really help the show to be great. So I'd put it in C tier and I'd give it a 4.5 out of 10. Oh boy, the first movie of Phase 4, which takes place during Phase 3 events. What? So I guess you'd ask me why we're going back in time to follow a dead character's journey. Well, it's actually to introduce Yelena Belova, a new character with not a lot of importance for now. And what about the movie? Was it any good? The answer, in my opinion, is no. Before watching the movie, I was actually hyped for Taskmaster, and she looked cool at first. But then while watching the movie, I realized that Marvel completely didn't care about her character. She wasn't the villain of the movie, this guy was. Who is he? I don't even remember, to be honest, and I don't really care. The story was pretty long and boring, and it was probably made just to make sure Natasha Romanoff had her movie. Does it bring anything new for the future of Phase 4, apart from new characters that aren't really important? The sad answer is no, sadly. I'd put it in C tier and I'd give it a 4 out of 10. At that point, I was annoyed by these last projects. I needed something that would captivate my attention, and for once, they did not disappoint. Loki is the third series of Phase 4, and spoiler alert, my favorite project of Phase 4. Exploring the multiverse that way was really captivating to me, and I loved Loki as a character since the first Avengers movie, so if they ruined this character's death with this series, I would be annoyed, and I would be done with Marvel. But they actually didn't, and they brought one of the most interesting concepts in the MCU, Time's Police, aka the TVA. During the 6th episode, there was this mystery of who was controlling all of this. And just like in Wandavision, I was captivated by the mystery during the whole time I watched the show. The music is also incredible. Shout out to Natalie Holt. I love how Loki discovers himself more by being around the other version of him, and even falls in love with one of them, which brings up a subject of discussion in our minds about, is this too much Alabama or not? And that's a good aspect for me. I'm talking about the debate, not about the Alabama. Loki has a nice character development, and the ending was insane for me. The introduction of Kang was really cool, and I can't wait for season 2. So for this one, I'd give it a 9 out of 10, and it goes in the S tier. What If is the first animated MCU project, and it is canon, but in different universes. It doesn't bring a lot of new things, it's just funny to see some what if moments. The show's kind of boring, not gonna lie, and I don't really care about the characters in it, because they probably won't ever be used again. Well, except some of them, but we'll get to that. I'll go fast on this one. B tier, 5 out of 10. Okay, I think this one will be kind of controversial, but I overall liked this movie. Hear me out. The fights were insane, the visuals were cool, and I like to see Shang-Chi's life and relation with his father. Yes, there are bad things in this movie, of course, but I generally enjoyed it. Let's mention the fact that the fake Mandarin was annoying as hell. They went in more with the visuals than with the story, I believe, in this one. Marvel wanted to impress the public. The humor was pretty bad in this one. I think it would have been better without it. But overall, I didn't have a bad time watching it, so I'd put in B tier behind Wandavision, and I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Do I really need to explain myself on this one? Chloe Zhao's directing skills are there, but it was straight up boring as hell. But spoiler alert, it isn't the worst project of Phase 4. We are not there yet. Anyways, let's move on with no explanation whatsoever, and let's put it in D tier with a 3 out of 10. Sorry. Again, do I even need to explain myself? This one was also boring. Well, Yelena is back, but that's pretty much it. Wait, is that why they brought this character to life? Not worth it. Yet. We'll see that in the future, but this show was just hella bad. I didn't enjoy my time watching it. Even with my friends, we all hated it. They introduced Kate Bishop, which is cool, but that's it. Echo wasn't a good character. Bringing back Kingpin from the Daredevil show wasn't a good thing in my opinion, because I don't think he had his place in it. Also, marketing said it was a Christmas series. Do you believe it? Well, actually it's during Christmas, but it's not Christmas related. I'd give it a 3 out of 10. You go in D tier, in front of Eternals though. Okay, now I have to admit a sin of mine. Nostalgia. This movie is pure nostalgia and that's why I loved it. Apart from that, it wasn't good, let's not lie. The story was just hide behind nostalgia by bringing back the old Spider-Mans and the old villains. That is, in my opinion, the biggest fan service ever made. And that's why I loved it, and I loved the hype around it while the first trailers dropped. Watching this movie the night it came out was probably one of the best time I ever had in theaters. But when you think about it, apart from bringing back actors, was it any good? Well, there was this emotional thing about it with MJ or with the death of Aunt May, but apart from that, it wasn't that extraordinary. I hate to admit it, but I like it just because of Toby, Andrew, and etc. So I hate to say it, and I know I shouldn't put it that up, but just because of the way I experienced the movie, I'm going to put it in A. And storytelling, talking, I should give it a 4 out of 10, but I can't say that because Toby's in it. So 8 out of 10. Conclusion. Lol, like I said too many times now, it's just a nostalgia movie and that's why people like me like the movie. And I hate to admit it. It's a sin of mine, I guess. Now this one wasn't perfect, but it was good enough for me. I was satisfied by it. Oscar Isaac played greatly the different emotion of his character. Like in Wandavision and in Loki, the mystery of this series really captivated me. The big problem that this series has is that it could have worked without Moon Knight. It feels like a forced superhero show, if you feel me, because it could have worked on its own without Moon Knight. Moon Knight wasn't that interesting anyways. I was more intrigued by Steven and the other version of himself. My life be like. And the villain didn't bring anything interesting in my opinion. Also, let's not lie, this CGI looked pretty rushed. It doesn't give away the goods of the show, but it shows that it was rushed and that with more time, it could have had better visuals and a better script. Anyways, I liked this show and I would put it in the top of B tier and I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Before watching this movie, I had so many expectations and these expectations were completely destroyed. I didn't like the movie. I know this one is pretty controversial, a lot of people liked it and a lot of people didn't like it. I will have to confess another sin of mine, expectations. I think that it is the main reason why I dislike the movie. It had so more potential than it was. I was so hyped by it and I was like, it's gonna be the best movie of the year. Well, it turns out it was a deception for me. I'm sorry, but as much as I loved America Chavez, I don't feel like she deserved to be there. Yes, she's the reason why the events of the movie happened, but the movie shouldn't have been around her trying to understand her powers with the help of Strange. Just the name Multiverse of Madness is hella cool, but it didn't feel like a multiverse of madness. Apart from when Wanda wanted her kids back. Oh yeah, you heard me. She was the villain of the movie. The idea was cool, but like I said, it could have been better. It could just have gone in a completely other direction and been incredible. Sam Raimi directed the movie. The guy who directed the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. He could have directed something much greater, but it is what it is. Some scenes were cringe for me too, like when they're standing in the underground waiting for Wanda to show up, like why aren't you running? Why aren't you running? And the fact that they brought in some characters that fans were waiting for just 5 minutes in the movie just to kill them off, it's just so frustrating. That's what I call fan service. Anyways, this movie for me, was a 5 out of 10, and it was hella mid, C tier. Okay, for this one, I actually forced myself to like it. At first, I liked it, but when I rethink about it, I feel like it was actually a boring story. I will say this though, I believe it is underrated, but it doesn't deserve the 98% that Rotten Tomatoes gave it. The characters were pretty cringe, the humor was also cringe, the action sequences were mid, and the story a little boring. The visuals were pretty unique for a Marvel project, so big ups for that though. But the story was about a girl trying to find her place in the world, and it is pretty basic. The fact that she's a fan of Captain Marvel is so cringe though. Could have you chose a better superhero than her, please? She does get a good character development at the end of the day, in my opinion. The villains were really bad and annoying, yes. But a lot of things were annoying in this show, and somehow I still enjoyed it a little bit. So I'd give it a 6.5 out of 10, and it goes at the end of B tier. Okay, this movie was clearly rushed. The humor was bad. Putting the kids in the plot was just meh. This ending was confusing, and bringing the Guardians back didn't have a really good purpose in my opinion. It's just because of the end of Endgame, after all. Now, how could Taika Waititi create this monster of a sequel because he directed Ragnarok, which is one of my personal favorite Marvel movies? The movie was missing a lot of points, but it was roughly cut from its original runtime of 4 hours. The movie could have been so much better, to be honest, and they even casted one of the best actors of all time to play the villain, Christian Bale. I think he was the only good part of the movie. I don't think Marvel deserved him. I wanted to see more of God killing, but the runtime was cut too much. And Natalie Portman being back was also just meh, in my opinion. The way it happened sounded like lazy writing to me, or like rushed writing. Not gonna lie, I think it's time we stop making Thor movies. He had enough. The humor took the biggest part of this movie, and because it was bad, it ruined the movie. Taika would have done better if he had more time, in my opinion, because he kind of made Ragnarok humor and it wasn't that bad, you know? So for me, it'll go at the end of C tier with a 4.5 out of 10. I'll go quick on this one. It's a 6 short films, so nothing really intriguing, and it was bad. So 3 out of 10 and a D tier. Yeah, I don't really want to explain myself on this one, lol. You'd understand it if you watched it. I'm going to be completely honest with y'all here. This is the point where I lost faith in Marvel. Since the ending of the show, I stopped being a Marvel fanboy. This is the worst project Marvel has ever made. First off, it never had a little bit of potential. The humor is so cringe, and the main character is unlovable. I didn't even have a little compassion for her. I wanted her to die. And you know what's worse? They brought back Daredevil, and they did. My boy deserved better. The time I spent watching this series was a waste of time. Excuse me, the Abomination is back. What do you think? They ruined him. He's now a funny but not funny guy. Okay, what about Bruce Banner? He was there? Don't even remember. Okay, so tell me, what did you find good about the series? Absolutely nothing. Everything about this show is straight up garbage. Don't ever trust Rotten Tomatoes again. The way Jennifer had her powers was straight up lazy writing. The villains were so forgettable that I don't even remember who they are. But the thing that really put me on my nerves was the ending. I never have been that angry at a show before in my life than I was while I watched the ending of She-Hulk Attorney at Law. They built up a story in 8 episodes, and in the finale, they threw it away in the garbage. Straight up, burned it in the garbage can. She-Hulk breaks the biggest fourth wall I've ever seen to change the ending of a story? No, Jennifer, it doesn't work like that. You can't do that. You can't just end 8 episodes of build-up with you magically changing the script because you don't like your ending. It doesn't work like that. Never have I felt more time wasted in my entire life than I was when I watched the ending of this series. I will never be touching that show ever again. You won't force me to do it because I will never watch it again. And I can tell you that it's a straight up 0 out of 10 for me, and I'm not even joking. it goes in the E tier. Now who paid Rotten Tomatoes for that score? Tell me lol, because I'm really curious. At this point, I was done with Marvel, but not gonna lie, I actually enjoyed the special. The ambience was cool, the intrigue was interesting, and the characters were not all annoying for once. Even if they looked bad, I liked it. It was a good surprise for me, so I'd give it an 8 out of 10, and it goes in the A tier. I'll resume this one because I already talked about it on my TikTok channel. Yes, I'm cringe like that. So the movie had a good soundtrack, a cool looking villain, but that's it. Everything else wasn't made for me. The movie is pretty depressing, the characters are annoying, the story is just based on an actor's death. Rest in peace, Chadwick. Black Panther is my personal favorite Marvel movie. Yeah, I have bad taste. Why do you think my channel is called Maximum Make Bad Reviews? And it wasn't a satisfying sequel for me. And I understand that Chadwick's death changed their own movie, but at that point I don't think they could have done better, so big ups for that though. So I'll give it a 5 out of 10 and it goes at the end of B tier. This might be controversial, but I quite enjoyed it. Drax being Drax was funny. The Kevin Bacon situation was a good running gag from the old movies brought back to life in the main story. I kinda liked it, even if I don't remember the morale. So 7 out of 10 and in B tier. Now that we're finished with my ranking of Phase 4, let's talk about why I think this phase sucked compared to the other ones. Phase 4 is the beginning of the Multiverse saga, which could have had more potential if the beginning wasn't that mid. While Phase 4 had 11 movies divided in 4 years, Phase 4 had 18 projects divided in 2 years. Now if you don't call that quantity over quality, I don't know how to convince you anymore, man. The over quantity of Marvel's projects creates a cycle, because the more project they do in less time, the more rushed there will be. So more bad project will release, and it continues like that. Disney wants their catalog to be full of Marvel content, because they know that with just the name Marvel, they can make a lot of money out of it. The people who worked on this project clearly know how to make good movies and stuff, but the processes needs time to make it quality, and they're clearly rushed, as we can see. And it leads to some lazy writing, of course. Also, Phase 4 is full of projects that don't really have a purpose except being a part of Disney Plus catalog. For example, I was not really interested by She-Hulk, well, not interesting at all, to be honest. And I still watched it, because it's Marvel. And sadly, there's the same problem with Star Wars nowadays. In Phase 1, the movies didn't feel rushed at all. It felt like the start of a bunch of superhero adventures and how they'll become who they are now. In Phase 2, it is a more depressing bunch of movies. We feel the problems of being superheroes and the responsibility they have to save people from danger. In Phase 3, the superheroes we followed have a lot of experience, and with that they have to fight enemies much stronger than the ones they fought before, and it also concludes many characters' arc. With that said, these 3 phases work perfectly together, and it brings a nice conclusion with Avengers Endgame, even if it teases future stuff. And so, Phase 4 came, which doesn't bring anything new to our screens. It's either about new characters that we don't really care about, or it's either about dead old characters. Marvel uses their character that has the least potential and tries to give them potential by rushing the project. They are the cause of their own failure. It's not about the public majority, it's about the money that comes in. So with that said, let's talk about why I'm scared for Marvel's future. This is my prediction of what will happen in Phase 5 and 6. First off, for Phase 5, there is 12 projects coming up, and if there's no delay, it will be during 2 years. Now, that is still too much in my opinion, and it feels like they will rush the writing and the CGI, and we'll still have mid-projects. From now on, I will have no expectations about a Marvel project coming in the future. Yes, I am still hyped for some of these projects like Loki Season 2 or the 2 Avengers movies, but I'm still scared of what they'll be like because of the recent Marvel projects. Ain't no way I'm gonna watch an Avengers movie in the She-Hulk style of direction. Anyways, the Infinity Saga will always stay in my heart forever, and the next Marvel projects will probably never surpass them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another bad critic of mine.